All right, it's my pleasure now to welcome on Fox Sports motorsport reporter, Brian van der Wakker. Brian, how are you today, mate?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me on the pod, mate. This is really exciting, Chris.
Mate, that's the first person who's ever been excited to talk to me. But it is actually perfect timing. Obviously, with everything that's sort of happened, Formula One, the last couple of days, especially from an Australian point of view, I was desperate to get someone on who knew what they were talking about because I struggle in this. So I'm looking forward to diving in with you. I mean, first off, like what you woke up the other morning, and we're going to deep dive into this Oscar Piastri. I don't even know what you would call it, but when you woke up the other morning, what was your first reaction when you looked at your phone?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I rolled over and checked my phone a little bit earlier than what I sometimes tend to do. And I had messages from my partner, because she was blown away by what was going on, and then a couple of mates of mine. And I'm thinking, oh no, here we go. So I open up social media as you do first thing in the morning, and there's the first story. Basically, Piastri says, "I'm not racing for Alpine." I'm thinking, what on earth has happened in the last few hours since I've been asleep? And then you do the digging and you do the fighting, and you just go, my goodness, the world exploded in just a few hours. So it was quite remarkable, and it's a situation that we haven't seen in Formula One for quite a long time. It has happened in world motorsport very recently, in fact, albeit just a few weeks ago, which we'll probably touch on a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, from 24 hours ago, thinking that, 24 hours previous, thinking that Piastri was going to be a shoo-in for that Alpine seat, and all of a sudden, all hell's broken loose. It was quite incredible.
Yeah, my brother lives in the UK, massive Formula One fan. He's texted me. His first text was like, let's go, with the Alpine statement. And then a few hours later, texted me another screenshot, and then an hour later going, you really need to wake the fuck up. So it is honestly staggering. But as I said, we'll touch on all of that later, and especially the other example which you just mentioned happening in other motorsports, which is very interesting considering the team who's involved with it and what likely is going to happen. But from your perspective, I guess, how do you sort of find yourself covering motorsports?
Gee, good question. I haven't always been asked this by quite a lot, but got to go back to, I guess, when I was a kid. I loved motorsport growing up as a kid. I mean, not that family was ever involved in it. Dad would always watch it, but I just instantly showed an interest for it and a passion. And then I guess how the journalism side rolled into it, particularly commentary. I love commentating, and I've done a bit of that over the past sort of 10 years and whatever. But I guess it all stemmed from sitting around home with Matchbox cars, pushing them around the floor, having this almighty big race in my head going on, and me actually commentating it. Mum's got some great shots of me. I think when I was 4, back in 1998, Christmas Day, I got this brand new slot car set, and I'm just going off the Richter scale, just about screaming my lungs out, commentating this thing. And to this day, it still gets, Mum still shows it to me and plays it to a couple of friends and things like that. And from then on, I growing up always wanted to be a race car driver myself, but the typical old story of family didn't have the money, and I certainly didn't have the money to do it either. So I was growing up thinking, how do I sort of turn this into some sort of a passion? I said, well, hold on. I've been commentating my PlayStation games and my slot cars for years on end. How do we turn that into a passion? And lo and behold, I went down to the local go-kart club on the Central Coast there, Central Coast Speedway Kart Club it was, and said, look, I'd like to commentate some of your races. You haven't got any commentators here. And they said, yep, here's they actually said, go down to the timing ladies down there, commentate to them, and they'll tell us how you go. So I did that, and I rocked up that day in me soccer boots and me soccer shorts. I'd just played a game of soccer, in fact. And that afternoon I was commentating their races. And from then on, commentated different tracks and things like that. And then went to university, studied sports journalism at Charles Sturt University. So Mount Panorama was in the background of every university class, and called the race for the local radio out there for quite a few years. And yeah, just stemmed on, went to Win News in Orange as a sport reporter, and then ended up at Fox Sports News, and here we are today.
What age were you going down to that go-kart track? Because that takes like a serious set of balls to sort of just go up to random people and go, hey, you don't know me from a bar of soap. but I want to commentate. I want to commentate your races.
Yeah, it was interesting because, as I said, I just finished soccer and it was 2011. So I would have been, I think I was 16 turning 17. And yeah, rocked up, like I said, soccer boots and all. And mum at the time, because I went along with mum, she actually had a friend that was racing. So he came up to us and said hello and things like that. And mum sort of said to me, Bride's sitting here saying, you reckon he could commentate this? So the friend, Graham was his name, turned around and said, come on, I'll introduce you to I'll introduce you to the club president. So I rocked up and he said, look, this is young Brian here. He said he'd like to commentate some races. They said, oh, wow, we've never had anyone offer that before. And yeah, literally, like I said, rocked up to the timing ladies. And it was quite funny because they originally said at first, we can't hear you. I said, yeah, that's because I'm saying it in my head.
Yeah.
I didn't have the...
Well, how do we know if you're any good?
I know. I didn't have the guts. I was too nervous because, if you commentate to a microphone to lots of people. Like, I haven't just commentated to a bunch of timing ladies before. This is a bit strange. So I was doing it in my head. They said, no, come on, say it out loud. So I said it out loud. I think I did one race. And they said, yeah, you're great.
Yeah.
Sent you back to the president and went back to the president and they actually had their lunch break. So there I am waiting around. And then I called one race and then, believe it or not, because it was dirt and speedway, the heavens opened. It started to rain. That was the end of the day. So
you're like, oh, perfect. Like just my luck.
One race. Yeah, and then it ended up being there was actually a couple of washouts after that, so I still had to wait another 3 months, I think, before I finally got to call my first race with them.
No, that's great. What would you say the best race or the biggest race that stands out now from a commentating perspective?
Yeah, when I was studying university and working at the commercial radio station 2BSB Rock in Bathurst. And my first year as part of their race team was the 2014 Bathurst 1000. And still to that day, that was just incredible. I mean, we started the day as per normal. The lead up to that year was quite incredible because Whincup shunted the car in qualifying on Friday and they started towards the back and he charged his way towards the front in that first stint from basically last to first at one point. As the pit stop cycle was shuffling itself out. So that first stint was quite incredible. Then we had the amazing scenes of the track breaking up, and on lap 61 of 161, the race was incidentally red flagged, and we had this incredible 1 hour period, like a halftime break, where everyone's going, what are we doing? No one sort of knew the rules at the time. People were changing. Whincup famously changed a transaxle at the time. And, Gary Rogers is complaining, these people can't do this and supercars can do this and da-da-da-da. And it was just incredible. And then after that, because there was this confusion at the time about whether or not we'd have a time certain finish and things like that, the race just exploded. And I think we had 10 or so safety cars after that point. There was first place was not where you wanted to be because everyone that happened to be in first ended up, something happened, whether they crashed or mechanical failures. And then we had that incredible scene where there was a last lap pass and Whincup ran out of fuel most famously and Chaz Mostert got by and our commentary box exploded that day. It was just incredible. And it was one of those moments where you always dream about a last lap pass, a proper last lap pass for the Bathurst 1000. I remember calling at the time going, you never thought you'd see something like this. This is history in the making. It was just an incredible day.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Is there something that sort of stands out, like a memory from your childhood, from like a racing point of view, like whether it's something like that, like a famous Bathurst race or Michael Schumacher, winning a race when he really had no business winning, that just sort of really, I guess, reaffirms your love for the sport?
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? I think one of my very first memories, in fact, first good proper memory. We were holidaying up the east coast of Australia at the time. This was 1999, so I think I was 5. And I came back into the caravan and Lounsey did his old pirouette down Calder in 1999 and went for that huge rollover. That was probably my first real memory of motorsport. And then growing up, I was red everywhere. I was either a Mark Skaife fan for supercars or I was a MS fan again for Formula One, being Michael Schumacher. But a certain race that stands out, I probably more so, I loved, because I was a proper Michael Schumacher fan, I loved when he came to Australia and loved seeing him win in Melbourne. You'd always get so excited for that event, and because obviously, we were able to watch it being at a normal time. So I think, my early memories I love the Australian Grand Prix weekend and love seeing Schumacher win there. And then obviously, going through the 2000s, Skase wins at Bathurst in 2001 and in 2002. And then most famously, really, the crazy battle that he had with Marcus Ambrose in 2003 where he didn't come out on top. So, I mean, it's hard to pinpoint one. And I've probably just overexposed on a few different moments there. But, yeah, actually going back and trying to think of one specific one, that's a difficult one, actually.
I guess that kind of shows the passion from the sport. If you can't pinpoint one specific one, it's usually a pretty good sign that you're in the right industry to work in.
I guess so. That's a worry, isn't it? Because, geez, there's lots of motorsport that happens from time to time.
Yeah, no, there is. Like, as we sort of mentioned at the start, Oscar Piastri sort of sent this just Australian Formula One Twitter, Formula One fans everywhere into sort of an absolute tailspin the last couple of days. So I'll explain the backstory. Fernando Alonso, who's driving for Alpine, two-time world champion, I believe.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, widely regarded as one of the best drivers in sports history. Left Alpine to go to Aston Martin, basically paving a way for what I think everyone probably thought was Oscar Piastri to just slot in and get a drive. He'd been an Alpine reserve driver. They couldn't find him a seat. There was rumors that he was going to go to Williams, and then they basically put out a statement. And then 3 hours later, he basically said, that was put out without my consent. I'm not driving for them. Like, I'm not driving there next year. And Alpine is basically stuck by that statement saying that he is driving, and he's like, well, I'm not. Just honestly, a real what the fuck kind of a situation. Like, what do you make of it? I guess from maybe from like I know we don't have the contracts, but like contractually, Alpine believe they're in the right. Piastri thinks he's also in the right. Like, what do you make of it?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I think first off, I don't think anyone knows the details yet, and I don't think anyone knows the proper information. So, I mean, we obviously only go off what we've sort of known through reports and speculating. And the fact that I don't think anyone knows what the contractual obligations are at the moment suggests that, this is heading towards the courts. I think that's pretty obvious at the moment. This isn't going to be resolved in the next few days, possibly even, the next week or two. This is going to be a long old fight, and what that will mean for Piastri long term, there's a lot riding on this. I think my first initial reaction was exactly what you said. What the hell is going on here? And I had a lot of discussions with a few people in the newsroom and with mates and a couple of journalistic friends of mine as well on the Tuesday when it happened. And your general feeling initially was, all right, this could be exciting, because if he goes off to McLaren, that's not a bad team. It's worth fighting for because there's half a chance McLaren, if they get things sorted, they'll be half decent next year. And then the obvious thing is, what about Ricciardo? Well, I've got this feeling at the moment that there's so much love behind Oscar Piastri, and I think we know that Ricciardo's a bit on the out. So I think if those two were to swap seats, I don't think there'd be too much bad blood, particularly for the Australian fans, towards Piastri, because I think we know Dan's had his moment in the sunshine. He's not going to be a world champion, where Piastri is certainly touted to be, one of the next big superstars. So I don't know there'd be any bad blood there. And I said this to a few people. I said, I hope all this fighting isn't just to go to Williams, because we know that Williams is, a back of the field team at the moment. And then I actually stopped myself in my own tracks and contradicted myself. And I said, but hold on. Because if you go to Williams, as we know, Williams has got a direct link with Mercedes. And if you look at the future long-term plan there, Russell's there for the long term. We know that. Hamilton, maybe only another year or two. So has the management team of Oscar Piastri, in terms of Mark Webber, have they somehow organised a solution where he goes to Williams? Maybe they've already had discussions with Mercedes and said, hey, look, let's do a year or two at Williams. You'll get picked up at Mercedes. So the interesting thing is with Formula One is that all the teams have feeder, or most of the teams, I should say, have feeder teams, right, in order to move up through the ranks. So you look at Mercedes, their feeder team is basically Williams. You've got Ferrari, their feeder team is Haas. You look at Red Bull, their feeder team is AlphaTauri. So what happens is the young drivers from those particular teams, AlphaTauri, they'll end up eventually one day probably at Red Bull. Alpine doesn't really have that because Alpine is seen to be the leading team for, theoretically, Renault. Same for McLaren. They're typically really the top team for McLaren. So there's no real progression path from that particular point on, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to jump off their ship if you want to go and win world championships with one of the big top three teams. So they may have used Alpine in some regards to work their way into Formula One, but now they may well be jumping off their ship in order to look 2 or 3 years ahead in terms of being in a top team. So it would probably make sense to end up at Williams in order to go to Mercedes one day. But the question here is, what does that mean for Mercedes if that does happen? Because for years, as we know, they've always stuck by their young drivers, right? So if Mercedes then jump off ship and all of a sudden sign a driver that hasn't been a part of their young academy for, well, forever, what does that say for the young drivers of Mercedes growing up? You know, it's like,
doesn't say much at all.
Yeah, it doesn't say much at all. And they've got young Nick de Vries there at the moment, current Formula E champion, and only a few
who
weeks
they've been
ago
desperately trying to get a drive.
Yeah. So what does that say for him? So it's you're in a rock and a hard place here, because I'm all for Piastri going to a big team, but at the same time, it's a real worry for the youngsters growing up in the sport. I mean, okay, we're dealing with a youngster here, but I mean, in terms of alliances, you know, you can see how cutthroat it is. But like I said, there's a lot to play out here, and who's not to say that you know, he's not at Williams. But again, that's just a hypothetical that's being thrown around at the moment. So yeah, in terms of contract, the big thing at the moment that's being questioned and it's been reported in the media is that there was a deadline on July 31. So apparently, according to different reports, Piastri, apparently in his contract, Alpine needed to sign him for a full-time seat by July 31. If they didn't meet that, then Piastri was on the market. Now, interesting to note that all this has come out after July 31. So whether or not something was known prior, what's really set it all off is that Fernando going to Aston Martin. You know, I don't believe that. Well, I believe that Piastri and his team probably thought, you know, well, there's going to be no opening. Alonso is going to stay here. You know, Ocon's going to stay here as well. You know, we're not going to have another year on the sidelines. We're better off trying to find somewhere else here. So there's a fair argument that was part of the process. And when you listen to the comments made by Sebastian Vettel, he only made his decision the Wednesday before the Hungarian Grand Prix, which doesn't leave a lot of time. And then obviously Alonso made jump ship quite quickly. So it's all happened extremely fast. Now, the swings and roundabouts of Formula One, all right? Whether or not this is intertwined, we're not quite sure. But let me explain this one. Fernando Alonso's manager at the moment, Flavio Briatore. He's Mark Webber's manager over time, used to be Flavio Briatore, who's Piastri's manager at the moment, Mark Webber. So as you can see, there's this little roundabout going on at the moment. So whether or not those management teams had actually spoken to each other when Alonso was looking to go to Aston Martin, and a deal has been done somewhere and they've manufactured something, you know, that wouldn't surprise me either. Flavio's been a guy that's been quite controversial in the sport over the years, and he's done some pretty interesting deals. So whether or not, again, this has been something that's been mastered behind backroom doors, and you know, they've done it properly and done it after July 31, then kudos to them. But yeah, like I said, there's going to be a lot of water to still flow under the bridge with this one.
Yeah, it is really interesting because the Williams thing, the timeline's perfect.
Yep. And
you have to sort of say with that, the message it sends to the Mercedes Academy drivers and whatnot. Toto Wolff's obviously a very, very, very smart operator. I think it's a possibility that he sees Piastri as a potentially generational talent. Like, we're talking about someone who's basically won championships at every level he goes to. He probably sees him as worth that risk to send that message. You know, he might not do that for, say, someone else, for, say, just Liam Lawson, just using him as an example, like someone else from F2. He might say, this, you know, we've got two world champions here in our car. This is worth the risk. It's worth the message that it sends. Do you think that that's that's a real possibility?
Oh, 100%, 100%. I think it is. There's no question about it. As you said, Toto's a very smart operator, and he will make decisions based off what's best for the team. And when you look at it, I don't see Nick de Vries being a world champion. And
No.
at the moment, I don't see some of their other young drivers being a world champion. Piastri, as you mentioned, is just a smart operator. I mean, he's outright speed, maybe not the raw. He hasn't got the raw pace maybe of a Hamilton, right? Hamilton can switch it on in a qualifying lap like you could not believe. Piastri, maybe not so much. But what has proven his worth in terms of being a world champion is that he is so mature for his age, right? He's so mature. He will think 2 or 3 laps ahead when other young drivers don't. And what that means is he'll get himself out of situations that might put himself in trouble. So some of the other young drivers, I'll go for that move. Oh, no, I just locked up and we're in an accident. Where Piastri will go, no, I'm just going to back off here. I know I've got the long-term pace. I'm going to play the long game. And not a lot of young drivers do that nowadays, right? It's all about thinking 1, 2 corners ahead. He's more than that. He's thinking 2 or 3 laps ahead. So that's what makes a world champion. That's what's made Lewis Hamilton very strong over the past as well. So, and it's typically what caught Max Verstappen out a few times.
Yeah. I was going to say early on in his career, Max really had that lack of maturity, where the Monaco Grand Prix, which Daniel won, bins his car in practice going for something that just he didn't need to go for, but it's just that ego thing, which you just see with typically, which you'd need to see with Formula One drivers, but it just went over that line. Yeah,
exactly. So when you look at it in that context, there's no doubt that he's got all the makings on paper to be a world champion. And it's no surprise. In fact, it's quite remarkable. And I'm trying to think of a similar situation, and I dead set can't. I can't think of a similar situation where teams up and down the grid, we're talking a lot of teams here, are fighting for a driver that has not even made his Formula One debut yet. Like, this is incredible. It shows you just how much people think of this young driver in terms of Oscar Piastri. So moving forward, I certainly see him at Mercedes, which is a genuine possibility. What's going to be interesting again, though, is that if he does end up there one day, how will they play the team game? Because you're going to have George Russell and Oscar Piastri both fighting for a world championship, and we know how that's panned out over the years. Just go back to
especially for Mercedes.
Rosberg. Go back to Rosberg and Hamilton. So how would they look after that and manifest that? But you're dealing with 2 different drivers as well. And Piastri, I don't think, has quite got the same sort of how do you put it? Same sort of rough and tumble as what Rosberg.
I was going to say they seem like very different personalities to Nico and Lewis.
Yeah, so I think you probably wouldn't have an issue in terms of that. But like I said, when you look at it holistically and backing up the point that you said as well, there's not a lot of young drivers at the moment really that are coming through on the Piastri level, particularly in the Mercedes family. So it wouldn't be a surprise, I don't think, at the same time to say, hey, if Toto goes, look, you haven't got anyone special at the moment. This is a special kid, Piastri. Let's keep our eyes on him. Let's bring him up.
Let's look at this from a McLaren point of view. So the 2 things I want to get your opinion on. One is Zach Brown and one is obviously Daniel Ricciardo. Now, obviously, I'm sure you get a million of these text messages. I get people asking me what's going on with Dan, as if I have an answer. I don't have an answer for it. I think we saw him struggle in the Renault his first season, came to grips with the car. In his second year, he had an incredible year. He hasn't come to grips with this McLaren car. So I guess for the first one is obviously about Ricciardo and your sort of opinion and sort of where he finds himself now in this a bit of a shit sandwich sort of a situation. And then your opinion on Zach Brown, who's a very loud, very American type operator who's not afraid to let it known his opinion, whether it's asked or not. But he doesn't have a great history of actually producing amazing cars at McLaren. And I feel like that's not something that's talked about with Zach Brown.
No, you're quite right. And to be brutally honest, I haven't heard a lot of people say that. So that's a really good point that you're making. It's 100% bang on. Yeah, he hasn't got that history yet, does he? And there's no signs pointing towards them having anywhere remotely close for World Championship car within the next season or two, really. So you're 100% bang on. With the whole Ricciardo thing, I don't think he doesn't even know really at times, you know. And if there was a solution, then they certainly would have found one by now. My thought always heading into this season, and I think it was the thought of a few people, is that he was going to be on top of it and he was going to be ahead of Norris. And the reason why we thought this at the time is because when Norris stepped out of F2, he went straight into a McLaren, and the feedback from a lot of drivers, Carlos Sainz was one, and he even passed it on to Ricciardo, and he said, look, the McLaren has got such a unique driving style, it's awfully difficult to get used to at first. So when you factor that in and factor that Norris has only gone from F2 to F1, the McLaren is the only car that he's ever been used to. So he doesn't understand what the different cars feel like.
Yeah.
So for him, he's thinking, cool, this is an F1 car. This is what they feel like. How great is that?
It's a step up from what he had.
Correct. So, you know, he's thinking, you know, this is fantastic. I've just gone from a PlayStation 1 to a PlayStation 5. Where the likes of Ricciardo and Sainz over the years, they're used to a Red Bull. You know, they eventually got used to a Renault. And then they've stepped into this McLaren and gone, oh, my goodness me, you know, I've had 10 years experience in Formula One. This is something I'm totally not used to. So they're having to go back to preschool just about and retrain their brain. And that doesn't happen overnight. And then we had this rules reset and new cars come in for 2022. And that's where we all thought, well, hold on, they're all going to be on the same level playing field here. You know, everyone's going to have to get used to this at the same time. And that may affect Norris more than most. But Norris has just come out and he's just gone like that. It's just night and day. He's quick once again. And Ricciardo for another season is struggling. The new car, the new rules package is just not suiting him. And he's typically been someone that has a great feeling for a car under brakes. And he's even said this year that no, the brakes in that feel fine, but just trying to find an overall balance and trying to find where that grip threshold is with the car, he just can't seem to find it. The last couple of rounds, I would say, certainly been his best. He's been within the ballpark of Norris that he hasn't quite been at points so far this season. So he is slowly now starting to turn that corner, but he certainly hasn't blown the socks off. And as we know, people are knocking now and asking the question, hold on, how much longer can he be here at McLaren? And whilst we're on that point now, and whilst I've taken the conversation down this path, I'm probably stealing questions from you here. This is the thing that really not bothers me, but really throws into question is certainly a number of few things. As we've known over the last few weeks, Ricciardo and Zach Brown have both come out and said, no, we support each other. We're here for the long term, you know, Hold on a minute. If Piastri comes in, you guys have just lied to each other for the last couple of months. Like, where's the commitment from you both? So at the end of all this, if Piastri is linked to a drive with McLaren, Ricciardo's got all the right in the world to say, hey, guys, thanks for your support in the last few months. You know, all the stuff you've just been saying, you've lied to me. You know, bug you guys, I'm going to go somewhere else. You know, or vice versa. So it's a real difficult situation right now for a lot of people. And, yeah, it's there may have been a few lies told in amongst all of that as well. But, you know, for Ricciardo's sake anyway, I hope that they've both been genuine to each other and that, you know, you will see out that contract through until next year.
Yeah, he doesn't seem like the type of person to, you know, like when Alonso left, you know, there was like, oh, is there a possibility that Ricciardo could? He doesn't seem like the sort of person to, and that's just my opinion, that would be that taking the easy way out. He doesn't seem like that sort of a person. Don't get me wrong. If McLaren do sign Piastri and then Alpine, that seat's obviously available. A direct swap, I wouldn't lose sleep about it. You know, I really liked him at Renault, especially the last season. You know, he had such a, in my opinion, everything's my opinion, but which is obviously you're the expert here, so you can tell me if I'm wrong. But for me, it felt like one of his strongest seasons in terms of actually how he was racing. Like, he got absolutely everything out of that Renault car in its last season. I think two podiums maybe. Just overperformed and absolutely smashed Esteban Ocon, who I don't think is a bad driver himself. So I think for a lot of Australian Formula One fans, seeing him back there would probably, I guess, relieve that tension or the anxiety that they're feeling going into a race week every week, which we seem to have in this season.
Yeah, and I mean, arguably, Alpine are fighting at the moment with McLaren for that fourth spot in the Constructors' Championship. So it's not like you're making a step back, or you're not making a step forward. You're only making a sidestep. And I called that at the time when Ricciardo went from Alpine to McLaren. I said it's not really a step forward or step back. It's just a sidestep really for him. And that would certainly be the case. I find it strange, though. I really just do find it strange. You've just left the team, and then all of a sudden you're turning back up there again in a few years' time. Mind you, it's happened before. Alonso did it with McLaren, and I mean that partnership broke up in an absolute storm back in the late 2000s there. So for him then to go back to McLaren was even more strange on a whole completely different level. But it wouldn't be bad. And to be honest, I mean, you look at the last results, particularly in qualifying at Hungary, McLaren were really struggling to make it inside that top 10, and Alpine breezed through into Q3 in qualifying. So, there's certainly some good signs there for Alpine moving forward if Ricciardo were to go back there and there was a straight swap. And like you, I mean, I would find it a bit strange that he's going. It's like going back to your ex-girlfriend, isn't it? It's a bit strange. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But in this case, hopefully it does work out for him anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we've seen this somewhat recently, and this is not a great comparison, but Pierre Gasly obviously had the Red Bull seat, wasn't coping with the pressure, maybe the fact that Helmut Marko is looking over his shoulder and probably berating him every session didn't help, and he went back to AlphaTauri, and that just familiarity. Oh, geez, I can't even say that word.
I can't even say that.
Yeah, you work in the media.
I know. I was trying to say where the other day, trajectory. So I can't even say that. It took me about 10 goes in the voice booth.
Yeah, I'm not even going to try that. But we saw him going back to AlphaTauri and just being so much more relaxed, having great results. His first win. So it does happen, and you know what? It might be something that does take, because there's no way Ricciardo is not tense right now.
No.
He obviously believes in himself, but there is only so much a man can take before you really start to grip that steering wheel probably a little bit too tight. Yeah,
exactly. And I think just going back to the contract stuff again with Piastri, now that we've sort of made the link with Alpine, it's interesting to note as well that Otmar Safnauer has got a history of this as well. He went through it with Jenson Button in 2004 at BAR Honda. Button wanted to move teams, and Otmar said, "No, hold on, you're contracted to drive for us, mate. That's not going to happen." They did end up going to court, and Otmar actually won. And Button stayed at BAR Honda, where he incidentally got his first Grand Prix win at Hungary in 2006, and it kind of actually worked out for him there. So it's interesting that when you look at this holistically, Otmar's got a history of actually winning these cases, and it's going to go, if it does end up going to court, it'll go through the FIA court. It won't go through the local jurisdiction, because if that was the case, we'd still be here 12 months later waiting for it to be heard. So it'll go through the FIA court if it is, and it'll get done quite quickly, but also get done by people that really know these things inside and out.
Yeah, no, honestly, it is we could probably talk about it for hours. It's truly a staggering start to what is, correctly named the silly season. I'd love to get your opinion on a couple of things. So obviously F1 is sort of, I guess, it hasn't exploded because it's always been so popular, but it's really hitting a new demographic of fan since the Netflix Drive to Survive. As someone who's obviously a Formula One fan beforehand, and obviously still, how do you see that, the impact it's made, and what's your true opinion on the show? Because I'm very opinionated about it.
My true opinion of the show, believe it or not, I actually don't watch it. I don't watch it. I haven't completed season 1. I haven't completed season 2. I think I've seen a couple of episodes of season 3. I haven't even started episode 4. So to be brutally honest, I actually don't watch it. I think because I sit there too much and think, oh, that's been edited, or that bit of commentary has actually been taken from a few races back. So I sit there like that because you watch it inside and out. You sort of know that, there's a fair bit of odd editing that's gone on in all
Bit of
this.
mayo
So,
put on it.
yeah, a bit of mayo put on it. So, I actually don't watch it. And Martin Brundle explained it perfectly. I went to a show that he and Crofty hosted in Melbourne prior to the Grand Prix this year, and he said it hands down. He goes, the Netflix documentary isn't made for you and I who love the sport, right? It's not made for us, So and Brundle, he goes, I don't watch it. I haven't watched a single frame of it myself. And he basically said it's not made for us. It's made for those people that don't have an interest in the sport. We're trying to create new audiences, and that's exactly what it's done. So I'm so happy that they're doing a 5th season. I'm so happy they're doing a 6th season. I've got no issues with it whatsoever. Like I said, it's not made for me. I don't watch it because I already know what goes on. But it's so good to see that so many fans have now turned out and enjoying this sport that we all love. And, if we can just drag a couple more eyeballs every Sunday to watch a Grand Prix, that's absolutely fantastic. And I mean, this ticket sales at the moment just gone bonkers. I mean, there was an article during the week that the Miami Grand Prix brought $500 million to the local economy. I mean, that's just nuts. And I mean, we're going to America 3 times next year with Las Vegas, and America was a market that Formula One could never tap into.
It could never crack into, yeah.
No, it's been so dominated by NASCAR and IndyCar, and all of a sudden, it's getting sold out within a couple of minutes. Like, it's just incredible. And America's always the market they wanted to crack, and they cracked that like there's no tomorrow at the moment. And that's why it's just gone ballistic. The Americans absolutely love the sport now. And, you look at the Australian Grand Prix this year, over 400, well, near enough to 420,000 people over those 4 days. I was there just as a general spectator. Work said, "Do you want to go down and cover?" I said, "No, I haven't." Said, I came to the Australian Grand Prix in 2020, and I was one of those poor buggers outside the game on Friday, the 13th of March. And I said, "No, I want to finish what I started back in 2020." So we got to do that this year. And I've never seen so many people on a racetrack before. It's crazy.
Bonkers.
I went to the Bathurst 6 hour the weekend after, and actually went, it's quite nice not to have to line up for
nice to be able to walk around.
Yeah, nice to walk around. But I mean, it's saying that, it's great. I wasn't complaining one bit. The more fans, the better. And then you look at the ticket sales for the Singapore Grand Prix this year, and that's typically an event that a lot of Australians go to. And I had gone to in 2018 and 19. I can't get it. It clashes with something else for me this year. But I was just genuinely interested in the ticket sales and said to a mate, let's watch and see how it goes. All grandstand seats for the Singapore Grand Prix were sold out within 8 hours this year. Me and my mate rocked up in 2019 when it was last on. They were still trying to sell a couple of grandstand tickets at the gate on the Friday. So it just shows you how crazy it's been. And yeah, it's difficult to get tickets to an F1 event at the moment. Who would have thought that? But like I said, it's fantastic, and it's great that Netflix has tapped into a new audience and a new market, because, as you mentioned, it's always been popular, but it's just gone to a new level now.
Yeah, no, I think I watch it. I hate I don't hate, that's probably a strong word. I don't like the manufactured mayo supplied drama.
Yeah.
I think I love Will Buxton, but he's almost the perfect person to do it. He's got that slow,
dramatic pause,
the slow dramatic pauses, and just all of this sort of stuff. He knows what he's doing. He gets absolutely everything out of it. So he's perfect to do it, but it does bother me, similar to you. Like, I know what's going on. I know that these two guys are not rivals. It's, they might have had they might have went into each other on corner 3, but they're getting at the same private jet to go back to Monaco. Like, it just that part of it I really don't like, but I do love the fact that it is sort of pushing it into new markets. I do worry though that what the cost that may be in terms of a race schedule. And this is something I wanted to get your opinion on. We're seeing a lot of contracts go up for historic races, like Monaco, the French Grand Prix at Paul Ricard, which is I believe that the first Formula One race there, or where it was considered was born, or whatever they carry on about the French. But seeing those races drop off the schedule probably wouldn't sit great with me. And I'd be curious to know how that would sit with you.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's like your Spas, your Monza, Silverstone. Yeah, they are the core of Formula One.
Yeah.
That's when Formula One goes back home. And then those events are great. And I really liked that they started going back to Imola because I think that's a special
Yeah.
place for the sport as well. So it's weird how the COVID pandemic actually sort of brought the sport back to its roots. Yeah, in some regards. Monaco, that's an interesting one. Prior to Monaco this year, I was like, you cannot take away the Monaco Grand Prix. That is the essence of Formula One. I don't know if I'm on the minority here. I don't know if I would actually be too upset if it was taken away. Now, the reason why I say that is that the Monaco Grand Prix used to always be that event where all the A-list celebrities would come, right? That was their jewel in the crown. Well, it still is the jewel in the crown of Formula One. But now, because the popularity has gone to a new level, you look at the Miami Grand Prix, the amount of celebrities that attended that event was crazy.
Martin Brundle didn't know what to do with himself.
Yeah, that's right. You've just tapped into a new one there. Look, no doubt Las Vegas is just going to go ballistic next year. So you've got a lot of these very upmarket races now, and no doubt there's going to be more to come. I think there was some talk of possibly Rome one year as well. I'm not entirely sure. At least I saw some sort of rumor about that just gone. So there's a lot more of these races now that are starting to overtake Monaco in terms of that real glitz and glamour and wanting to be there kind of feel. So, and look, Monaco is a great track for qualifying. Every driver loves throwing their car around Monaco. But I looked at the cars this year and I looked at the track and I thought, these cars are actually genuinely too big now for Monaco.
It's brutal, yeah.
It was the first time, and I know last year's cars were bigger, but I don't know, just looking at it on TV, for some reason, I just thought this year's cars actually looked bigger.
They looked huge.
Yeah. Probably the reason why I thought it looked bigger is that I genuinely actually watched the Formula E race just a couple of weeks prior, and they put on a great race at Monaco. Geez, it was good. And then you go to Formula One and you go, you know what? It's just, the track just doesn't suit it anymore. I'm sorry, but it just... 5-10 years ago it was still good, but I'm really starting to lose that real passion for Monaco now, and it's a shame to say that. Maybe we're putting a finger on it too much because it is under the spotlight, but for me there's so many other glitzy glamour events that you can go to now that kind of fills the void if Monaco were to go.
It's those fake FOMO events I like to call, because I sit there on my couch going like, I wish I could be there. And I'm like, I have that real FOMO feeling, despite the fact I know I'm never going to get there. I know I'm never getting on a yacht. I'm never going to be in that place when the race is on. But this race this year was one of the first times where it did get to that, I could take this or leave this kind of thing. Because I think back to that Ricciardo's win, where I sort of mentioned, Max binned his car and obviously killed his qualifying, but even he had an unbelievable race, and he was overtake. Like, it looked impossible to overtake this year on a track it's been really difficult to overtake. I personally want it to stay just because of the history, and maybe I'm a bit of a nuffy from that aspect, but from a TV viewing point of view, especially when you have got a large number of new fans who do not care about the history of the sport, like someone like me or you would care about, they are just like, what is this crap? This is brutal.
And I think you summed it up perfectly there. I think it's not a case of, us sort of saying it should or shouldn't stay on the calendar. It's a case of, you know what, for the first time I actually wouldn't be too upset if it were to or not be on the calendar. You're speaking of watching it on TV. The one thing that's interesting about the Monaco Grand Prix is the TV directing is not done by FOM. Formula One, it's done by the people at Monaco, and geez, there was some bad directing there this year. It's getting worse as the years go on. So sometimes the TV experience isn't all that good, but it's like you said, it's one of those events where still to win the Monaco Grand Prix, it means something, doesn't it? And things like that. But it's still an event that I certainly want to go to one day, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, 100%. We'll finish up on this one, and it's a controversial one. So last year, obviously, probably one of the most incredible championship finishes. Came down to the last race. Nicholas Latifi binned his fucking car and just created utter anarchy. Where do you sit on the decision by Michael Massey to let certain cars unlap themselves? And just, I'm not saying that Max was handed the championship. I think it was the wrong decision. I also understand why it was made, and the fact that it is a car race in the end of the day. What was your opinion on that whole, we keep saying, like, shit show, whatever, clown show, whatever. Like, what was your opinion? Because it's a truly divisive, like, moment.
It certainly was. And I go back to, again, when Crofty and Brundle had their Q&A show in Melbourne on the Tuesday before the Australian Grand Prix. And this was spoken about for about 45, 50 minutes. And there's so many different variations of opinions on this one. Let's put it this way. I couldn't watch back that moment for quite a few weeks. The only reason why I had to go back and watch that moment is because I had to cut a season review for Fox Sports News. So that was actually the first time that I watched the last lap battle back in some regards. I had a bad taste in my mouth on that particular day because it was difficult. What hasn't been spoken about enough is that when you go back and have a look, and I studied the timing and the data and the telemetry after that, and what doesn't get picked up enough on is that people thought that Hamilton would probably come out in second. When you go back and study the data, when Hamilton actually came into the pit stop to do his pit stop, the delta loss normally for when you make a pit stop there was about 21 seconds. So when I've got to try and get my numbers. Sorry, I stand corrected. When the normal delta loss, I've got to try and get this right. That's right. The normal delta, it's been such a while since I've thought of it now. The normal delta loss there was a bit more than sort of 21 seconds. Your pit stop loss time. When it goes under VSC, which it was about 14 seconds.
Yeah.
Now, the margin that he had for memory at the time was about 10 seconds back to Max Verstappen. And when you look at the timing, when Hamilton actually crossed that pit entry line, the margin had blown out more than 14 seconds.
Oh, wow.
Which therefore suggests that Hamilton probably could have made the pit stop and come back out in front of Max Verstappen. Now, Mercedes previously have had a history of getting that wrong. You go back to Monaco a few years ago, and when the VSC came out, they got their numbers wrong and cost them time. And there was another race this year, I think it might have been Miami, where Hamilton, they pitted under VSC. Hamilton came out and said, geez, why am I so far back? Or he may have pitted earlier, and then the VSC happened, and he said, why am I so far back? It's because people made the stop under VSC, because when you neutralize the race and bring it down to a certain speed, obviously the time gap blows out because, time over distance therefore expands. So when you go back and study the data, and you can still do that, I believe, on the F1 timing app, when he makes that pit stop, the time blows out. And I'm always under the firm belief, and there's a very few people that have picked up on this. Hamilton could have made that pit stop, I believe, and come back out in front of Verstappen. So strategically, Mercedes missed the boat. Mercedes missed the boat. And that, I think, is key. And they, like I said, they have had a history of that. That's not a surprise. In terms of the decision, though, because at the end of the day, what we got was what we got. The decision, as it's been heard by the courts, was obviously the wrong one. Well, not by the courts, never got to that point. But the initial findings and the ultimate fallout is that, yes, the decision that was made on the day was incorrect. Those lap runners should not have been, well, they could have passed the safety car, but the issue was the safety car came back in on that lap. So the ruling at the time is that if you let the lap cars go, which they did, the safety car will then come in on the next lap. If that was the case last year, the safety car would have come in on the last lap, and it would have been a race from the last corner to the start-finish line. That would have been it. It would have been status quo. The issue with the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix is that the safety car came in on that lap when the lap runners were given the green light. So that was the key thing in the rule book, and that was the moment that actually sort of ruined it for everyone. So what I haven't agreed with, though, is that the amount of backlash that Michael Massey copped, right? So we can all cop that he made the wrong decision, and fair enough, it had quite, massive ramifications. But for one human, we all make mistakes, right? Massey's only human. We all make mistakes. But for the amount of criticism that he copped and the finger pointing was so not right and so incorrect. And I think the FIA and Formula One have really sort of, in some regards, really contradicted themselves, because what they proved afterwards in their findings is that when they came out this year and said, hey, look, we're going to put in a new race director, but he's also going to have another race director, and there's also going to be another team of people that back him up. I'm sorry, but Michael Massey was one man, and he had all of these other jobs that have been created this year. He had to do all of those jobs at the same time. Don't you think the guy had a little bit on his plate? Like, you've got Christian Horner screaming down your neck saying, why aren't we restarting this race? Blah, 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 blah. Toto Wolff, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? That's the wrong call. I mean, if you're getting blasted by arguably some of the biggest names in world sport, I mean, it's gonna hit you quite hard in that particular moment. So in the pressure moment, Michael Massey cooked, right? But you look at what they've done this year, and now all of a sudden there's a team of people that will communicate with the team principals. So how can you sack a guy that hasn't got a team that's backed up by him? It proves that the actual procedures that were in place at the time by the FIA and the Formula One was set up to fail, 100%. So, it's so hard because Massey was put in a rock and a hard place there, and that was the ultimate falling out. The only question, the only contradictory thing to all of that again is that when Charlie Whiting was in the sport, he had such a good relationship and managed all those things very, very good. So, he built up a relationship for years and years and years with all the teams. And then Massey was literally only thrown into that job for what was set to be only a couple of weekends after his sudden passing with a heart attack in Australia in 2019. So, it was a shame because Massey sort of just had to take on the role of what Charlie Whiting had done. And Whiting did so many different roles within the sport, and all of a sudden that was lumped onto Michael Massey. So you got to take that into account as well. And he did a great job trying to manage all of that as well. But yeah, there's a few people, and Brundle was very much of the same opinion. And, would all of this have happened if Charlie Whiting was in charge? And, the firm belief was, probably not. We certainly do miss him, but that was a very controversial day. But looking back, like I said, the wrong decision was made, but at the same time, it was made because the right procedures weren't in place.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's well said. I know you have to go, but if I didn't ask you to just a quick thought on the Ferrari, the Ferrari strategic mess that we're sort of seeing this year, I'd kick myself. So do you have a quick thought on the mess that the Scuderia seem to be making for themselves every race weekend?
Ferrari doing Ferrari things, eh? That's basically what I've been saying to people. I mean, every time they put themselves in a good situation, they just kick the can and the trash comes flying out. I mean, the previous race just gone, the Hungarian Grand Prix, putting on the hard tyre, I didn't think that was an overly bad call, because they were kind of boxed into a situation they didn't want to be in the first place, because Red Bull decided to pit Verstappen somewhat early and therefore try the undercut, which was always going to work. So you weren't going to win the race by doing exactly what Verstappen was going to do. So actually going on the hard tyre was good, because you were trying something different in the hope of winning the Grand Prix, right? So I don't fully disagree in the fact that going on the hard tyre was all that bad. What they should have done, though, is made changes early. They should have gone on the soft tyre earlier in the race. So they got themselves into that situation because they didn't make the decisions earlier on in the race. Conversely, you could have looked at it a different way, in the fact that Ferrari could have done the overcut. They could have stayed him out longer and then therefore gone on a soft tyre late in the race. Exactly what Carlos Sainz did. You could have mirrored that strategy and put it onto Charles Leclerc. So in looking at all that, okay, going on like I said, at that particular point in the race, and the decision that they made at the time, the hard tyre was the right call, because the soft tyre wouldn't have got through to the end of the race. I don't believe so. But in the hindsight of it all, whilst that might have been the correct decision at the time, the actual correct decision was either to go onto a soft tyre earlier in the race or do the overcut and leave him out there longer on that medium tyre. Because if you listen to Charles Leclerc after the race, he was like, the medium tyres were fine. I could have gone longer. So, when you look at it, all right, the decision they took to go to the hard tyre at that time of the race, like I said, was correct. But the actual correct decision was to stay out longer and try and do the overcut. Did it cost him all that much? To be honest, I don't think so, because Ferrari didn't have the general outright pace. Red Bull was so much quicker, so they were never going to win the race. And to be honest, he probably only cost himself a position or two anyway. Because I think the podium was fairly set. I think Hamilton and Russell probably would have jumped Leclerc during the pit stop phase as well. So I don't think it really cost them all that much. But again, they're making incorrect decisions, and like I said,
on a weekly basis.
Yeah, on a weekly basis. And this one was tough because they were boxing into it by Red Bull, but they've had many other situations this year where it just hasn't gone their way. And it's a shame because they've got a fast car, but they haven't got the team to back it up.
No, 100%. Perfect way to finish. Brian, thank you very much for that. A lot of fun. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the Formula One season. Hopefully we see some better results for Ricciardo and a peaceful resolution of whatever this Piastri mess is going to, how it's going to play out.
Yeah, watch this space. Get your popcorn ready, because who knows where this saga is going to end. It's been great. But thank you for having me on, Beyond. It's been a pleasure. It's been great to talk Formula One. I don't get to do enough of it sometimes. We get stuck in the NRL world and the crap that goes on there sometimes. So it's good to open up in the world of Formula One. Pleasure to be on.
Thank you very much for that, mate. I truly appreciate it.